Echo Framework. In this final section, we are going to talk about frameworks and middleware. The topic of this video are frameworks in general and Echo Framework in particular. We have been doing great so far, you might say. Why this sudden change of course? Why suddenly talk about frameworks and using third-party solutions? Because, my friends, we have reached the point of diminishing returns. We have learned a lot about two fundamentals of all APIs, routing and caching, and a few other concepts as well. They were relatively easy and straightforward to implement. The remaining ideas, the security, encryption, and logging, require deeper background knowledge, and their implementation is not as simple. Other people have done this for us already, and quite possibly made it better than we could. It's no different than using the Storm library to handle both DB access. Sometimes you don't have to know how things work behind the scenes when all you want to do is to use them. You rely on other people's ideas and implementation. This saves you time and allows you to build both prototypes and working solutions quickly. It has, of course, its drawbacks. Relying on third-party code means more danger of hitting bugs and security issues that you are not aware of, and possibly hard to fix. Therefore, in a critical environment, you would either want to write as much of the code yourself as possible, or carefully examine the code of the library that you want to include. There can also be licensing issues if you intend to sell the software that you write. This is something that you need to check out as well, not to be caught unaware when the lawyers come knocking at the last minute and suddenly you realize that you cannot meet the licensing requirement. What do you get in exchange? As mentioned before, you are most likely profiting from the expertise of other people. For example, the developers of the Echo framework that I keep mentioning made a conscious effort to design and implement an extremely fast and low-print router. If you want to spend your time and resources on this, great. But more often than not, your task is to deliver an actual working API, and the time that you can allocate to twiddling with code is limited. Also, the more people using a library, the greater the chances of finding an error, and the more incentive for the developers to fix it. The more people look at the code, the more chances of spotting security holes. It's also much easier to get support from other users if you are struggling with a particular issue. Finally, with adopted standard, it's easier to find other people familiar with it and less time required to train fellow developers in using, maintaining, and extending your code. Imagine if there was no RESTful API standard and everybody was using their own custom solutions. Me? I've lived through it. It was called CGI, and these were dark times indeed. We're so much happier now. What frameworks are out there that help us working with APIs? You probably heard of Gorilla. This is one of the earliest ones out there, and also still the most popular. The name, though, aptly describes its footprint and swiftness. It's large, not very fast, and sometimes difficult to work with. You might also have seen HTTP Router, which outperforms Gorilla by a lot. But it's only a router. There are several frameworks that use it, though. The most interesting one is perhaps Gin, which is fast, reliable, and offers most, if not all, features that you would need when writing an API. Gin would definitely be my second choice if Echo was not available. It is my first choice if I have an elaborate job with strange requirements. However, Echo is still faster and lighter and sometimes easier to work with than Gin. It might not have all the bells and whistles, but it has enough of them to be of great use in an extremely fast-paced environment. The documentation is perhaps a bit lacking, but once you get your head around it, it can really run circles around Gorilla.